Now we continue on to, which I have not exactly announced. It's kind of last minute. When we started on Wednesday, I decided we should take this opportunity each day, if you have time, to go over a few pages of this new publication that came out of the Germany translation, Gongchik translation group in Germany, who've been doing excellent work, making these precious teachings available to us. This is called the Single Intention. There is another big book called the Buddha's Single Intention, also on the Gongchik, and that is by Professor Zovich, published by Wisdom Publication. This is a smaller volume, more manageable, and here it contains the root text of the Gongchik, as well as a commentary written in the last 100 years by this Nyingma Khenpo Kunpal, who is one of the Nyingma Lama Petro Rinpoche's main kind of disciples. So Khenpo Kunpal, inspired by the Vajra Statements of Gongchik, wrote a very brief commentary on the Gongchik. So I think especially for people who have interest in the Gongchik and just starting to kind of try to understand a little bit of what it is saying, I feel that this commentary is manageable. It's not so technical, and it's not so long that you get kind of lost in what is going on. So there are three parts to this Gongchik text, as well as the commentary, of course. So the root text has what's called virtues in the beginning, which is the verses of homage and the promise to compose the text. Then the main part, the virtues in the middle, which is the main body of the Gongchik itself, consisting of 7 chapters in 150 statements. And then virtues at the end is the conclusion verses that is there. So we have finished at this point the virtues in the beginning, which is very short. And then the main text is really the 150 statements in the middle. The whole collection of Gongchik statements total to about 196 thereabouts, because there's also, as I mentioned yesterday, differences in terms of its how certain statements are given. Sometimes 2 statements are combined. In some versions, in some early versions of the Gongchik text, some statements are not present as well. So there's these differences. So more or less 190 something statements is what is in the entire Gongchik. But 150 organized into 7 chapters is considered the main. And then there is a miscellaneous, so to say, auxiliary chapter, which is extra statements that in some ways their meaning is already found in the 150 statements organized into 7 chapters. So then these 46 statements are, in some ways you could say, the compiler, Sherab Jungne, Jenga Sherab Jungne, took them out and put them into this one chapter. Also to point out, in this publication is a translation of a very early explanation of how those extra statements are connected to the main statements, which is very nice. So it says something like, this statement 1 in chapter 1 of Gongchik, when you read this statement, you should also read statement number 7 and number 8 and number 9 of the miscellaneous chapter. And this statement 4 of chapter 2, when you read this statement, you should also read statement 42 and statement 31 in the miscellaneous chapter, because it will further illuminate what the main statements are saying. So there's an early instruction like that, written by Chenga Sherab Jungne's brother, I think, Rinchen Changchuk. Rinchen Changchuk, people believe, was the brother of Chenga Sherab Jungne. So anyway, so here we are just beginning the very first statement of the first chapter. So if you have the book, I don't know if any of you have the book, it's page 104. So it says here, so the title of this chapter is called the vital points, or the key points pertaining to the Dharma wheels. So here, the translator gives us a footnote that says, these Dharma wheels refer to the 3 cycles of teachings that the Buddha gave. So there is this very common expression that the Buddha turned the Dharma wheel on 3 main occasions, so to say. But this occasion is not like just 3 times. It's basically a way to organize, to put into these 3 boxes, so to say, all the teachings that we say were given by the Buddha. How do we organize them in such a way that we can see that, although on the surface level it might seem like there are some contradictions, but actually if you know where to place them within these 3 categories, then you can see that it's actually without contradiction. So this is called the 3 Dharma wheels in this translation. Personally, I like to translate this a little different, which is the 3 turnings of the Dharma wheel, rather than 3 wheels. Because actually, there's only one Dharma wheel. It's the 3 turnings. And this is especially relevant when we're talking about the way that Kyopa Rinpoche understands, how all the 84,000 teachings are related. For him, all the 84,000 are the 84,000 aspects of the one single Dharma. He doesn't see the 84,000 as 84,000 alternatives to realizing the Dharma. He emphasizes that the 84,000 are 84,000 aspects of the single Dharma, so that when you realize the single Dharma, you penetrate all 84,000 Dharmas. Conversely, he encourages us to learn the 84,000 dharmas in order to achieve the single realization of the Dharma. It sounds intimidating, but it is not meant to intimidate. It is also not to encourage us to run around collecting teachings like insane. Especially in Vajrayana circles, people love collecting, like Boy Scouts collecting merit badges, I have this empowerment, this empowerment, this empowerment, this empowerment, this empowerment, this empowerment, Luckily, we don't have a tradition of like giving out these badges to sew onto, your Dharma robes, Otherwise, oh my gosh, we have all these different patches of all the different things that we have received. It's not to encourage us to for wrong motivation, run around collecting dharmas, going to this lama, this teacher, that teacher, and then, getting all confused and overwhelmed. No, it's not about that. But nonetheless, by saying that, we should aspire to learn the 84,000 dharmas. That is to keep us kind of focused and appreciating the profundity of the Dharma. The single reality of the Dharma, from one perspective, is only one reality. And that is from the aspect of when we are freed from confusion. When we are not freed from confusion yet, then we need the 84,000 antidotes to counteract the 84,000 kleshas. And the Buddha has given us, that's the good news, the 84,000 dharmas to treat the 84,000 kleshas. So it's a single dharma wheel turned 3 times. So the vital points concerning the turnings of the Dharma wheel. So the first point. Now, one thing to say is that this commentary, like many commentaries, they don't necessarily give you the root text, like the statement itself first. It's a style of composition. So Tibetan style composition, different from maybe how we might compose things these days. If we were to compose something like this these days, I think we would more appreciate it if we say, okay, first tell me what you're commenting on, right? So you will say, okay, I'm commenting on this statement. So you give the statement first. But the style of composition, often in Tibetan commentaries, is to have the words of that line that you're commenting worked into your whole commentary. In part because if you want to read this commentary, you want to listen to this commentary being taught to you, often the teacher would say, first you memorize the root text, or at least the section of the root text that the teacher is going to teach. First you memorize it. And yes, monks, nuns, they stay up the night before. I don't know if any of you have gone to, stay a few days at least, in a monastery. And if you have, usually in the evening, you walk by the dormitory of these monks and nuns. They will be inside, chanting out loud. And that's their homework. They have to memorize sections of the text. Because the next morning, when they go to class, before the teacher start the teachings, they will point, they will say, okay, you start the section, memorizing. Start from memory. So you have to say, la, 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 and then the teacher says, stop. Okay, you next, you continue. So randomly to make sure that everybody has memorized the root text. Then the teacher will start. Okay, so today we are talking about, and so then when the teacher teaches, right, he or she doesn't need to say, today, this section I'm commenting on. Because when he uses those words, instantly the students recognize. So this is the style that this commentary is composed. So if you have the book, it's easier because what the translator and the editor of the book has done is they give those words in bold letters, bolded. But when you are just listening to me without the text in front of you, might be a little challenging. So, never mind. Also in this volume, they also translated just the root text. So here, let me read to you from the root text itself, which is not given explicitly in Khenpo Kunpal's commentary. In the root text itself, it says, the Buddha taught the actual reality of the nature or state of all phenomena. The Buddha taught the actual reality of the nature or state of all phenomena. And this is the translation. For the original Tibetan for this first statement is Chukun Shisam Babki Neluk Ten. Chukun Shisam Babki Neluk Ten. This line is, the statement is very interesting. When we were studying the thick volume, the large commentary on Gongchik, we spent quite a bit of time looking at this statement. Shisam Babki, Chukun Shisam Babki Neluk Ten. It has so many layers of meanings, so that when you translate it, you have to choose, the main layer you want to emphasize. So here is translated as the Buddha, and the Buddha in brackets, in parentheses, because the subject in Tibetan writings, subject need not always be explicitly stated. That's just the way, right? And Tibetan grammar and writing is. So sometimes it's very obvious what the subject is, and sometimes the subject not being there makes you have more choices of how you interpret the statement. So this statement doesn't have a subject explicitly stated. It just says, so if more literally, you would translate it as taught the actual reality of the nature or state of all phenomena. Without the Buddha clearly identified. But the translator identifies as the Buddha taught the actual reality of the nature or state of all phenomena. So there are two things, nature or state. So that's the root text. Now let's look at the commentary. The master of the 10 strengths, the master who has the 10 powers. This is referring to the Buddha. The omniscient, the all-knowing, exalted one, taught. So this word taught is from the root text. Taught the actual reality of the nature or state of all samsaras and nirvanas phenomena. So in the root text, it just says all phenomena. Here, Khenpo Kunpal helps us to understand when it says all phenomena, it's not just samsara's phenomena, but nirvana as well. So again, the master of the 10 strengths, the omniscience exalted one, taught the actual reality of the nature or state of all samsaras and nirvana's phenomena, which is the profound meaning of the non-duality of emptiness and dependent origination, just as it is. So Khenpo Kunpal here says, the meaning of this statement is that the Buddha has taught the non-duality of emptiness and dependent origination. Just as it is. Clearly. Without mistake. Because this is the ultimate realization of Buddhists. Buddhists not only realize emptiness, Buddhists not only have woken up to the truth of emptiness, they can also see how dependent origination arises. How dependent origination arises. In other words, in another context, we say Buddhas see completely and clearly the workings of cause and effect, karma. According to the teachings on the 10 bhumis, 10 bodhisattva bhumis, it is said that when bodhisattvas arrive at the 8th bhumi, they have realized both the emptiness of the self of persons and the emptiness of the self of phenomena. But there is still the 9th and the 10th bhumi. Why? Because further, very subtle obscurations related to the emptiness of the self of phenomena still needs to be completely purified. So that it is only at the 11th bhumi, which is the bhumi of Buddhahood, that one can see completely the workings of cause and effect. So in that sense, the ability to see the complete workings of cause and effect is something that is even more profound than seeing the truth of emptiness. But ultimately, emptiness and dependent origination are non-dual and inseparable. Look at it from this side, is the truth of emptiness. Look at it from this side, is the truth of cause and effect, dependent origination. While there are passages in this sutra or that sutra or this tantra or that tantra that has expressions such as beyond cause and effect, especially Kyoba Rinpoche will say, we have to be very careful in saying such things and interpreting such things beyond cause and effect. In particular, he will say, you cannot take this literally, beyond cause and effect. If you take beyond cause and effect literally, you are risking the danger of nihilism. Because you deny that there is the workings of cause and effect. Beyond cause and effect means you are no longer fighting with the principle of cause and effect. Buddhas are beyond cause and effect in the sense that nothing they do is against the principle of cause and effect. They have completely removed and cleansed delusions, confusions that cause them to create causes of suffering, expecting for the result of happiness to turn up. They have completely purified any kind of instinct, any kind of motivation of destroying causes of happiness and thinking that, suffering will not come. When they have thoroughly and completely seen the exact relationship between causes and effects, nothing they do will violate that principle. And in that way, they are beyond cause and effect. So we should be very careful when we say beyond cause and effect and not risk the danger of nihilism. Maybe yesterday or 2 days ago, I briefly talked about relationship between Nagarjuna and Jigten Sungam and how Nagarjuna taught the non-duality of emptiness and cause and effect or dependent origination. So in Nagarjuna's most famous text, Mula Madhyamaka Karika, verses to the center, the root verses to the center, to the middle, to the center, Mula Madhyamaka Karika. There, Nagarjuna says, because of emptiness, therefore dependent origination is possible. If it wasn't if it wasn't that the nature of things are empty, then nothing is possible. So anyway, there he greatly expounded on this notion that dependent origination and emptiness are two sides of the same coin. And how I mentioned how Nagarjuna, as Nagarjuna in India, taught this principle, which the Buddha, of course, first taught, Buddha Shakyamuni, but Nagarjuna brought this into clear focus. And so he taught this. But generally, the Mula Madhyamaka Karika is focused on the emptiness side of things. And even though he, from time to time, reminds people, you could also easily understand this from the dependent origination side of things. And mostly Nagarjuna would taught using sutra references, sutra sources. Then here in the praise, it says that Jigten Sungam is the emanation of Nagarjuna in Tibet. And therefore, in the case of Jigten Sungam, he also greatly emphasized the non-duality of emptiness and dependent origination, as Khenpo Kunpal explains here. But Kenjen Gonjo Gyalsen Rinpoche one time said, we were talking about this, and he said, it seems like the way Jigten Sungam handles this, teaching this inseparability, non-contradiction between emptiness and dependent origination, and him being an emanation of Nagarjuna, this time, Nagarjuna, as Jigten Sungam, would teach this same principle, but emphasizing the dependent origination side. And using a lot of Vajrayana sources, Vajrayana explanation, Vajrayana knowledge. And so, if we take both together, then we have a very full, very good picture from both sides. In this way, we can see, the unified mind, the unified intention of both Nagarjuna and Kyoba Jigten Sungam, which of course is the single realization of Buddha Shakyamuni. So here, having understood this himself, he, the Buddha, taught the actual profound nature of phenomena's dependent origination, according to the capacities of tameable beings in terms of their dispositions, faculties, and motivations. And so here Khenpo Kunpal, recognizing the emphasis of Gilbert Rinpoche, he says, the Buddha, having understood the non-duality of emptiness and dependent origination, the Buddha having understood this himself, he then taught the actual profound nature of phenomena's dependent origination. Interesting, Khenpo Kunpal didn't say emptiness. Of course, dependent origination is also emptiness, but how it is used is he taught the actual profound nature of phenomena's dependent origination, and then here the further link. And why? Or how? To what purpose? According to the capacities of the beings that are to be trained, in terms of their dispositions, their faculties, and their motivations. So here we see that this emphasis on teaching dependent origination is emphasizing the compassionate aspect of the Buddha state. Realization of emptiness emphasizes the wisdom aspect of the Buddha state. Dependent origination emphasizes the compassionate aspect of the Buddha state. In the end, even the wisdom aspect of the Buddha state, unless that wisdom is used, right, to benefit beings, then that wisdom is no different from the wisdom realized by the hearer Buddhas and the solitary Buddhas. The Shravaka Buddhas and the Partaker Buddhas. See, in terms of wisdom, what solitary realizers, Partaker Buddhas, solitary realizer Buddhas, and what hearer Buddhas, Shravaka Buddhas, what they realize in terms of wisdom, it is said to be no different from what a complete and perfect Samyasang Buddha realizes. But if we factor in the wisdom of seeing the exact way that karma works, exactly which cause combined with which conditions ripen as which result, which is said to be a very subtle object of knowledge only accessible by Buddhists. That one is what makes Buddhas Buddhas. And that ability is solely and thoroughly and completely for the purpose of ripening, maturing the capacities of sentient beings. Khenpo Kunpal continues, it is said in the sutra requested by Anavatapta, it's a name of a Naga king, Anavatapta. So quoting that sutra, whatever arises from conditions does not arise on its own. It does not arise by its own nature. Whatever relies on conditions is taught to be empty. Whoever understands emptiness is prudent, is wise. So here Khenpo Kunpal don't want us to forget the emptiness side of things. But also showing how whatever arises from conditions is then, therefore, not something that arises solely based on its own power. So that's why we talk about causes and conditions. And that is also what dependent origination is. Interdependent arising is. And what is interdependent arising is taught to be empty. Therefore, whoever understands emptiness is wise. So this quote. Then he goes on to quote Nagarjuna. Nagarjuna says, since there is no phenomenon that is not dependently originated, that has not arisen through interdependence, therefore there is no phenomena that is not emptiness. And Nagarjuna also says, for whomever emptiness is possible, meaning for whomever who sees and understands the truth of emptiness, then everything is possible. For whomever emptiness is impossible, whoever that cannot see and understand the truth of emptiness, then everything is impossible. This statement is very special. Again, so many layers that is possible. So many layers of meaning can be uncovered. And over time, as you practice the Dharma more and more, as you learn more, as you experience more, as your learning and your experience come together more and more, and many realizations arising, when you read these quotes, which you have read maybe 100 times, you will see that, the first time you read it and the 100th time that you read it, your understanding has changed. Moving on, this profound dependent origination is the cherished treasure of the teachings of the victorious ones, of the Buddhists. This profound dependent origination. It is said in the letter to a friend, Nagarjuna again, this dependent origination is the profound cherished treasure of all the teachings of the victorious one. Whoever sees this genuinely, without faults, clearly, sees with this realized awareness the Buddha, who is supreme in all aspects. In other words, whoever sees dependent origination sees the Buddha. The manner in which this dependent origination is taught gradually is like it is said in a sutra. Just like the grammar teachers make their students read the alphabet, so the Buddha teaches the Dharma to tameable beings according to what they can take. So here is to emphasize that, yes, there is the profound truth of emptiness, which is also the profound truth of dependent origination, but insofar as the way Buddha instructs the beings, the disciples, the Buddhas do it in a gradual manner, in a way that they can digest. With this first Vajra statement, the body of this treatise is established, and the general framework or overview has been taught. So often it is said this first Vajra statement is very important because it lays out clearly the fundamental principle of the entire Gongchik. The 150 statements, all those statements are based on this statement. So which means, if at the beginning we don't quite get, it's okay. There is another 149 statements. But if in the beginning you say, oh, I think I'm starting to get what this means. Also very good news. Then as you go to statement 2, 3, 4, all the way, finishing 150, and hopefully your mind will become brighter and brighter. Also important to know, none of these statements stand on their own. Right? You cannot just read one Vajra statement and quote it without considering what the other Vajra statements are also saying. Otherwise, if you do that, you just take one Vajra statement and you're like, oh, I'm going to ignore the other 149. Yeah. Maybe except for this first statement. Any other statement inside, if you just take it and you ignore what is said in the other statements, you might end up with a serious misunderstanding. You might become a fundamentalist. Be careful. Also, in this volume, that text where I said, Rinchen Chanchuk tells us, for this statement, please read it alongside statement this, and that. It's very helpful in preventing us from just reading one statement and says, oh, well, that's what it says. And forget, oh, wait. Over there, that statement says also this, and this, and this. Then you have to modify your understanding of this statement due to 3 other related statements. Good? So today we should end here.